Alright, this is Shop by Tools Technical Support Channel, and today we're going to discuss diagnosing a flashing power supply or a no LED on a power supply. Now oftentimes when these are given problems, we often feel that the problem is the supply itself, but it's commonly the case that it's not the supply, and it's actually something that's connected to the power supply. So here we have a 24 volt supply, and here we have a 5 volt supply. They both have green LEDs and they're steady. Now if you see at the bottom, this is where the power comes in. It's just 110 volts to power this supply, and it puts out 24 on this one and 5 volts on this particular unit. So let's get right into it. Now the first thing that you want to do when diagnosing these are to actually disconnect the blue wires from the top of the supply. So you would want to power off, and if you look here, these are held in by screws, so you can get a little Phillips screwdriver, and here they're held in by tabs where you can just push down these orange tabs to eject the wires. Now if it's the case when you pull those wires out and power on that the power supply has an LED, that power supply is functional, and what it means is that something connected to that supply is causing it to short and no longer function and make it flash or give you no LED. So let's start with the 24 volt supply. And a 24 volt supply is used in a number of areas because 24 volt supply powers your contactors. It powers your here on the control board. It also powers your fan, powers your reset circuit, powers your key switch. It also powers your limit switches, your proc switches. So if you look here, you see you have brown wires. Now commonly, it's been my experience that it's been a torn wire on one of these. So usually, if I know that the supply is not the issue, first after disconnecting my blue wires, the next thing that I go to is remove these brown wires from the plus 24. A different board maybe mounted at the bottom of the board, but remove these brown wires and then power the unit back on, and then we want to look up here to see if the supply is steady again. If not, that wasn't the problem. Also commonly the problem is the fan wire. Now the fan on some or most may even not be wired to fan plus fan minus, but if you have this, go ahead and just power off and pull these two out and power back on. But commonly it may be actually mounted or wired into the supply, into the plus and minus terminals. So the next step would be to remove the fan wires, and if that is successful, you can power back on and you would get a steady light. It may have been one case where the contactor or the board itself was shorting it out, and that's a little harder to discover, but you could essentially disconnect the RX wires one by one, or the K wires, all the blue wires one by one. So that's how you get to the bottom of the 24 volt power supply. Now for the 5 volt supply, which is generally the slimmer one, it's the same process. We first remove the wires, and if we get a steady light after removing those wires, then we know that the supply works. It works fine, but whenever something's connected to it, it doesn't work, meaning that there's a short on something connected to it. So here are the things that use 5 volts on the control board. The power comes in here, so you could start by removing this, And commonly, once that is removed, the light will come back on. So we know the problem is on the board. Now, commonly down here, this red wire, this is from the Z0 plate. This is where the problem is. So you want to remove this red wire from +5. Those are really the only two devices, the board, all of your inputs, and this red wire. So you could also disconnect this block here, because each of your inputs use 5 volts. So you would just pull this block off. So first try to disconnect this red wire. It's been my experience that here in the +5 area, that's been the problem. But if not, you could pull this entire block off where the inputs are, you know, 1ZZ, 2PX, and you can see they go all the way here. You may also have something in the +5 over on the right side of the board, which is here. So give that a shot, see what happens. Oh, the final thing, the controller card outputs 5 volts. So you could also remove this controller card. So you can see that right here. This is usually held on with 2 screws. Right here, I don't have screws on mine, but it's usually held on 2 screws. Once those screws are removed, you can just pull back and take the card off. If you see that removing the card causes the light to go steady, then it may be either the card or the ribbon cable. So you could actually remove these ribbon cables from the board. If you look behind it, I don't know if you can see this or not. Let me see if I can. But on the back of that board, there's 2 ribbon cables. This one is for inputs. The bigger ones for inputs, the smaller ones for outputs. Some of these may be gray, and the color doesn't matter. I don't want to get caught up in that, but we could disconnect that ribbon cable to also see the issue. Hope that helps. Thanks for watching.